Welcome to the final lesson in our token-based authentication course. In this lesson, we're taking a look at automatic login. We'll understand why we need it, then we will implement the feature, and we will conclude by adding a security measure. Let's get started. So why do we need automatic login? Well, as our application currently stands, when a user logs in, we see in our Vuex state that we have this user data. But when the browser is refreshed, notice how this user state disappears. That's because Vuex state isn't going to survive a browser refresh. And if we look in the console here, we see this 401 error. That's because our user data was cleared, so we no longer have the proper credentials to be accessing the private resources that live on this page. We don't want to force our user to log back in every time the browser refreshes. Also, we might want the user to be able to close the tab today and then open it up tomorrow and still find themselves logged in. Automatic login can accomplish this for us. So let's implement that feature now. We'll do so in our main.js file. So we want some code to run when our app is created. So we will add the created lifecycle hook. And inside of here, we'll create a const of user string, which goes into our local storage and gets the item by the name of user. And if we do have a user in our local storage, then we are going to parse that user string into JSON, storing it within a const called user data. And then we will use Vuex to commit the set user data mutation, passing in that user data as the payload. So again, when our app is created, we're checking if there's a user in our local storage, and if there is, we're taking that data and we're restoring it within Vuex. Now this should work, so let's check it out in the browser. When we log back in, of course, we have that user state in Vuex. Then when we refresh and check the user state, it is still there. Perfect. So we got automatic login to work. That's great. But while we're here, I want to address a security measure. Let's take a look at the problem. If we take a look at the DevTools, specifically the Application tab, we can see our local storage. And when we log in, we have this key of user, and the value being our user data, including the token. When we log out, this gets cleared out. But there might be an ill-intentioned person who wants to hack into our app. They could technically create a user key and put in some fake user data. And as we see, when we refresh the browser, our app is tricked into thinking there's someone logged in. When we go to the dashboard route, notice that we see loading events. That's because at this point, we're using a fake key, so we're not sending the server the proper credentials to be accessing the private events that get returned. In other words, this hacker could only get so far, but what if there's other private information on this page that we don't want a non-user to see? We can detect for behavior like this and force a logout when this happens. So let's implement this security measure now. We will do so in our main.js file. And first, we're going to import Axios. Still in the created hook, just below the if statement, we'll say axios.interceptors, which allows us to intercept this Axios request, then .response.use. Inside here, we'll say response, and then return response if everything is okay. But if there is an error, and if that error has a response status that is equal to 401, meaning we don't have the proper credentials to be accessing what's on the page that we're trying to, then we will use Vuex to dispatch the logout action. Then below here, we're going to return promise.reject and then pass in the error. So why are we doing this? Well, as you can see in the tip, this creates a new rejected promise for the provided reason, that reason being the parameter that we pass into it, or the error. So we are returning a new rejected promise with the error as the reason for that rejection. Now let's test this out in the browser. If a user were to input a fake user key and value, when we refresh, it tricks our app for just a moment, But as soon as they go to click on any route that makes an API call, such as our dashboard, yep, you'll see that they are automatically logged out. Perfect. Let's review. In this lesson, we learned why we need automatic login, implemented it, and then ended by adding a security feature. This brings us to the end of our token-based authentication course. I hope you feel confident to implement authentication in your own Vue app, and I'll see you in another course. Great, now our user can... Great, it works. Done. Now, so ignore all